Hi there. Hopefully everything's coming through okay. Looks like my sound is working. Hi, and welcome to the Board Game Broadscast. My name is Mattie Schraeder, and tonight we'll be talking about creating and testing tabletop games in Tabletop Simulator. Feel free to ask any questions during or after my presentation. I have the chat open up over here, so I'll be able to see everything. This is the inaugural episode of Season 2 of the Board Game Broadscast. You can find the broadcast on Facebook and YouTube. The links are above me. And you can, as for me, I'm a hobbyist game designer, blogger, and software engineer. I also help run the Geekway to the West board game convention. I've designed 2 tabletop games, both of which we'll be looking at as examples of how to get a prototype up and running in Tabletop Simulator. You can find my information down at the bottom here. Good, everything's coming through. Awesome. I'm going to go into this assuming that you know basically nothing about Tabletop Simulator, because that shouldn't scare you away from getting your prototyping and playtesting in during, well, all of everything going on. So, in the online board game field, there's a few options of what you can work with. There's Tabletop Simulator. It's a paid application on the Steam store, and that's what we're talking about tonight. But there's also Tabletopia, Board Game Arena, Yucata, Bortaju, which hopefully I pronounced those right, Vassal, and there's some others. They all have positive and negative points, but to me the beauty of Tabletop Simulator specifically is that for a small buy-in, it's $20 on the Steam store, but it's often on sale for much less if you keep an eye out. For just one-time buy-in, anybody can put their games online. That's both a positive and a negative, because reasons, but it's not a big deal. So tonight we're gonna be start with preparing files for importing into Tabletop Simulator, as well as importing them, setting the table up for playtesting, uploading to the workshop, and while I go through each step, I'll be explaining how to play games on the platform, and playing and prototyping is basically the same. You're gonna have no problem if you can play it, you're gonna be able to prototype. If you can prototype, you're gonna be able to play it. It's pretty easy to figure out. So, let me pull up my other window. There we go. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is prepare all of our files to show up in Tabletop Simulator. Now, in my game Walking Doggos, my designer, Cody, he made all my graphic design for me. And in this, you have to, it's almost perfect for Tabletop Simulator. We basically ended up just having to cut from his cut marks until we have specific, basically a grid of 4 by 2, and each card is the grid. So when I ended up with this. That's one way of doing it. Another way is if you have individual files, you can open those up in Tabletop Simulator separately, which is a little painful, but we can make that even easier yet. So in the Tabletop Simulator installation folder, which you can get to if you right-click Tabletop Simulator and go to Properties, you'll go to Local Files and Browse Local Files. This opens up your File Explorer into the main file system for Tabletop Simulator. There's a really handy modding folder in here. And in the modding folder, there are deck templates. And we can open these up in whatever image editing file software you use. And you can basically just fill in all your cards by drawing on the art, drawing on the template, and coloring it, or doing whatever you need to do. So we'll just do some quick design. And then we're going to go ahead and save this somewhere on our file system out to where we can get to it later. So here you can see we have now a 10 by 7 grid. And on the bottom of this has a hidden card to other players. I'll explain that in a little bit, but this is the basic layout of any Tabletop Simulator file. They also have a square template, which is the same thing, but all the cards are squares, which works really good for like tile-based tile laying games. So there's the other way. But like I said before, if you have each of these individual files already, there is a deck builder application. And the deck builder application is really easy to use. You just click Create New Deck, say how many cards you want to be in it. We'll just leave it at the default 10 and 7. And then now we can go to our tabletop files. Let's see, I need to look at Tabletopia files. Here we have a bunch of cards. We're just going to grab a handful and drag them into the deck editor. Now I automatically... Oh, did we lose me? Okay, it looks like I'm back. Okay. So this automatically makes that nice big grid program for you. It has everything up and running. It just works. Once you're done, you can hit File and Export, and it will. You want to hit maximum deck size here, and what that will do is shrink the file down to the perfect size to fit all your cards. You can even upload it to Imager or to various uploading files, which then I'm not going to worry about uploading them right now. We're just going to export, and then we save it somewhere on our desktop. So that'll end up with another set of files that looks basically like this. One example is in my other game, the Tabletop Simulator files that it came up with were these, and they were just really quickly done. As you can see, this is a 10 by 7 grid, but it's only 60 cards, so it's 10 by 6. We'll fix that in Tabletop Simulator itself. So here's another example. It's just a simple PNG. And this one is another one that has transparency. So we have all of our files, and we just need to open up Tabletop Simulator and add them to a game. So for the first time, we're going to open up Tabletop Simulator. And this will take a second. This is where all the magic is going to happen. So since we're playing by yourself and we're just setting up a table for people to use, we're going to hit Create and create a single player game. And here, we're gonna play a little bit with just a simple deck of cards. So I'm going to open up the cards table. So how this usually works is you'll have a table that's basically a physics simulator in some kind of, I guess we're in a church, it's kind of creepy, for a card game, but that'll work. So you have a deck of cards. You can draw from the deck by just clicking and dragging off of the deck. You can pick up an entire deck by clicking and dragging and holding onto it for a second. The middle mouse button allows you to rotate things around, so you can do things like that. You'll drop the card on the deck, and it automatically makes a deck again. You can right-click anything, and it'll have this nice little menu of everything you can do in the game when you right-click it. So if we want to shuffle, you can see we click on Shuffle. Now, over Shuffle, there's the letter R. That means that you can use the letter R on your keyboard to shuffle the deck. So as you start building your game, you're going to be wanting to pay attention to all those little shortcuts, because eventually you'll be able to do everything really quickly. It just takes a little bit of time to get used to. But you can also cut into multiple piles, split into multiple piles, deal out to different players, and that's the basics of Tabletop Simulator. It's really just a big, fancy physics model for playing games. And because of that, I'm hitting F to flip cards, by the way. I know the church is haunted. It's creepy. I don't know how I feel about this setting that it put me in. So we're going to actually look at what a final game would look like. And we're going to use my workshop build of my own designs. This is Walking Doggos, the doggo art I was showing you a little bit ago. So how the game is set up is it's ready to play pretty much right out of the box. You have all the cards that you use in the game, you have a bowl with tokens, and you have a PDF that I can open and read all the rules of the game. And this is what most players expect when they open up Tabletop Simulator. Sometimes games will get really, really complex. So this is the Frosthaven demo and it's going to take a minute to open. For the Frosthaven Kickstarter that came out, just ended, last week? So it's going to load, and it's going to take a while. All the stuff to build a game of Frosthaven. But it also has this whole little menu system up here. Some games are going to have scripting that allows you to build out the game. So we're going to run game setup. We're going to sync scenarios, and we can load up one of the scenarios. And it does a whole bunch of work to pull out cards and everything you need. And then we can add the play area. We can add a player to the game. And you basically do that for each of your players. Each player is going to sit down and either add or remove a player. And it gets really complicated, but it's still really easy to work with, because for tokens, you can just pick up a token and move it anywhere it needs to go. Some stuff will actually click and lock into place. So if I pick up all these guard cards and move them, and I want to put one back, it's going to snap right back where it's at. So that's way more fancy than you need to really do, but that's kind of the scale of what you can expect out of a Tabletop Simulator mod. So how do you get to here? We're going to create a classic game, and we're going to click on Custom. We're not going to load a custom deck or a custom board, so we're just going to... Oh, I think because I had Frosthaven loaded, I need to clear everything. So sometimes games will corrupt themselves because it's Tabletop Simulator. So where's my table? Alright, we'll add a table. Alright. So pretend this opened up cleanly. You're going to end up... Oh, I'll explain how to snap stuff in 30 seconds. We're getting there. But good question. So we're just going to click and highlight everything on the screen and delete it, because we don't need any of the stuff that they set stuff to. We're also going to right-click the board, and we're going to delete that. So now we have a nice empty table, and we have a big black void. So we want to kind of decorate a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is choose Objects, Tables, and you can pick a table that's most fitting for your game. Some of the nicer Tabletop Simulator mods will have a custom table where you can actually make a table with your own artwork on it and your own color design. A lot of people like the standard rectangle, which is this. Nice and classy, just a standard game table. My personal preference for most of the games I design is the octagon, which is just a really nice big table, and it has room for all 8 players around it, and it feels good for most of my games. So I'm going to use that one. The next thing we want to look at are points. If you mouse over anything, once again, it will tell you what it is. And points can be used to create snap points, which was Pam was asking about, anywhere in the world. If we click on that, sometimes there will already be points on the board. So the first thing you want to do if you see any green dots is hit delete all snap points and hit yes. So now we started with a nice clean slate. The first thing we want to do is put a snap point right in the center of the table. That allows us to find where we want to put the board now that we've put the board in place. So we're going to switch back to our grab tool, and we're going to make a board. And we'll go to Objects and Components. Components have everything that you can put into the game. These are everything from blocks, boards, cards, pieces in games that are pretty common, poker chips, as well as a bunch of tools and random stuff that make organizing your game really easy. So we're going to start with a board, and we're going to choose Custom. So here we need to browse our local files. So everything in Tabletop Simulator will tell you what it supports. If you hit the little mouse over the little question mark, it'll tell you upload a file, and then paste the link here and hit import. Tabletop Simulator makes that really easy to upload stuff. So we're just going to hit browse local files. And we are in my Walking Doggos folder, and I keep a folder called TTS, which has all the files I need for Tabletop Simulator in one nice neat little folder on my desktop. So I have a board file, and we're going to select that. And it's going to ask if I want to upload it to the Steam cloud or load it to my local disk. We're going to hit upload to cloud. You almost always want to upload to cloud. If you do it a local file, then multiplayer games won't work. So we'll hit upload to cloud. It's going to ask you where you want to upload it, and I just use the root folder. I'm not fancy. I don't do much organization in this. I just make it work. So as you can see, we have a Steam user content ID now. We can hit import. And that's basically how you import everything into your game. It will resize the board to fit the image you pass in, and it basically just works. Boards are automatically locked in place, so you can't interact with them, which is usually pretty good. If you don't like that, you can right-click and unlock it, and this will let you pick it up and move it around, and that snap point brings it right back to the middle. The board's a little big for my tastes, so we're going to shrink that. If you right-click Scale, you can scale it up or down with the plus or minus button, or by clicking these buttons. So we're going to shrink that board a couple of notches using the minus button. And now it looks a little bit better on the table. And it's still pretty well centered because I put that snap point in there. So we can lock that back into place by hitting the L key, which once again you can right-click toggles, and freeze the object in place is the L key. Everything is keybound. It's really easy once you start picking up on everything. So now we've built the first layer of our game. The next layer is each of the decks. You want the decks of cards. So we'll go back over here and choose cards, and we choose a custom deck. This looks a little scary, but it's literally just like we did for the board. We're going to choose a face file, which in this case we're going to choose our pugs, and we're going to load it in the cloud and upload. And we're going to say unique backs is basically if each card has a different back in your deck, or if you have one back file. We have one back file, so we're not going to check that. We'll hit browse, and I have a file called backs.png, which we're going to load from the cloud, and that's what you do every time. My files are, as I showed you earlier, 4 by 2. This is how many images are in your card file with long ways and height in columns. So a lot of the samples that you see in Tabletop Simulator are that 10 by 7 column. Mine are 4 by 2. This is how many cards are in the deck, and there are 8 pugs, but I actually only want 5 in my game. So we're going to bring that down to 5. And what back is hidden is, as I showed you in the template before, and I'll pull that up again, the last file, that 70, is what it sees as the hidden file. So if you can't see what's on a card, or you're not supposed to see what's on the card, it's going to show you a different layer. I usually don't worry about that. I choose the back as the hidden, because I want my backs of my cards to be the same, whether if you see the front of the card and you can't see the face, then it's just going to show the back. And I'll explain that a little bit better in a few minutes. So we fill out our form, and we hit import, and after a couple of seconds, it will load. Well, I almost did it right. My fronts work, but I hit the wrong back file. So custom deck, pugs. I chose backs instead of back. Back is hidden. Import. There we go. Now I have a deck of cards. Just like the cards that we started with in the beginning of the game, you can pick up a whole stack by clicking and holding, or you can grab one card by clicking and immediately dragging off the pile. So to set up my game, I want to have all the cards face up. And I want them in a specific order. So I want the 5 to be on the bottom. You can see the shadow to see where it's going to fall at. So you kind of want to just eyeball what looks good. There's not a whole lot of tools for like lining everything up, so you just have to do it by hand, and the shadow helps a lot with that. After we drop a card, we're going to drop a point. And notice if I click up to the right here, it's automatically going to drop that snap point in the middle of the object I click, which makes it really easy to keep your positioning good. Go back to our grab tool. Now we're going to put the cards into a stack, just like that. And we're going to repeat that for each deck in the game. So I have all my cards kind of spread out. We don't need to do that on stream because I've already done it. I'll jump forward in a minute. The next thing we want to do is those tokens I talked about. So tokens are just blocks, nice and simple. If you click add a red square, it adds a bunch of red squares. So there's 4 red squares. I can pick them all up. I can move them around. I can throw them. There's physics. It's exciting. Cubes. We can copy and paste now that we've created a couple. I need 17. So there's 4, 8, 12, 16, 17 cubes. They're also a little big for my tastes, so we're going to shrink those using the minus key until they look about a size that you think looks good. And I don't like that they're red because I have a red card in the game. So we're going to change the color of the cubes using the color tint feature, and we're going to choose brown and hit apply. Now we have a bunch of brown cubes. And really, you can just leave them there if you want. It's not really important to my game that it looks good. You just put cubes on the table and you're basically ready to play. But you want your game to look good. The better it looks on the table, the more likely somebody's going to want to play it when they're looking at the Steam workshop. So we're going to go to miscellaneous and choose bowl. We drop a nice bowl into place. It's brown. I don't want it to be brown, so we're going to make the bowl white. And it kind of makes it a gray because it's actually adding a white layer on top of the brown that it already was. But I like how this looks. Then we're going to take all the cubes that we put and attempt to drop them all in the bowl. This is the most kind of frustrating part of Tabletop Simulator, is it's so focused on being a sandbox that some things are a little bit clunky. So we put everything in the bowl, and now we're going to pick up the bowl and move it somewhere useful. And now we can lock the bowl into place using the lock toggle. So now you can quickly grab all of your tiles. So the other interesting thing about how my game works is cards. When you have a hand of cards, I haven't explained that yet. You can drag a card into your hand, which is right at the bottom of your screen, or you can drag it to a player color on the side of the table. But when you pick up a card, it's going to let you see and flip the cards that are in your hand. In my game, the cards are held face out, kind of like Hanabi, if you're played that. But if not, no worries. How we can fix that is if we go to options. These are a lot of permissions and settings that you can add to your game to make it work differently. So we're going to go to hands. Hands are enabled, which is the default. And we're going to choose reverse. So everyone except the owner can now see the cards in their hand. So I can't see these. And if I try to flip them, they're still invisible. That's the back is hidden feature that I explained a little bit earlier. But if I drag a card into another player's hand, I can see the cards they're holding, but they can't see the cards that they're holding. So I can't see mine, but I can see everybody else's. To change player, to kind of see how this works, you click your name in the top right, and you choose change color. Now I can jump over to purple, and I'm the purple player now, and now I can't see what's in my hand, but I can see that the pugs, 1 and 2, were in my hand over there. So that's one of the options you can set. Another one is to turn on turns. Turns are a little bit weird in that it'll keep track of whose turn it is, and when you finish your turn, you just hit end turn, and it'll keep track of everybody who's seated in the game and pass the turn to them. That's really useful in games with turns, but this doesn't really have turns, so it doesn't really work so well. But that's one option. And then you can change the lighting for the room. I never really bother with this. You can add a grid. So if we add a box grid and we show lines, now I can kind of see a layout of my board. This is helpful for putting snap pieces into place. It's helpful for lining up stuff in more complicated games, which I'll show in a second. But we'll go ahead and turn the grid back off. So that's really the basics. If I go to Games, Workshop, and just load my finished product, as you can see, the only thing I didn't really show you was how to add a PDF. So here we're going to go to Custom, and Custom PDF. This works just like the other stuff, but you find a PDF, such as my rules PDF, and upload it to the cloud, and import. And now you have a little PDF that you can pop up on your screen, and you have to close your objects window, but pop up on the screen, and here you can actually change what page you're on and reference it, because when you change pages, it also changes it on the table, which is a really cool feature when you're referencing rules and explaining how to teach the game. You can kind of have the rules actually on the table to show people. But what about more complex games? Walking Doggos is really easy, really simple, especially in Tabletop Simulator. You just drop a couple decks into place and you're done. My other game has a lot more to it. So we're going to load that one up. And once again, it takes a minute to load. I'm going to switch back to the white team because that's where that's the default. It's where most players are going to load into the game. So I have all sorts of stuff in here. As you can see, I have these little GPU tokens I showed you earlier. I have CPU tokens. I have these memory sticks. Those are all really easy to add to the game as well. So we're going to go to Objects, Components, and we're going to add Custom Token. Now the difference between a token and a card is that cards are automatically stacked. Cards are treated as a deck. Decks have shuffling features and all of that. So if you don't need those, custom tokens make really cool tokens. So we're going to hit Browse Local Files and switch to my white hat file, and we're going to find my GPU token. Upload it to the cloud again. You can choose how thick you want it to be, and as you can see on the screen over here, I should use my actual cursor, that chooses the thickness. I usually use the defaults. The merge distance is how accurately it'll try to trace your image. If it's something really, really fancy shaped, you might want to turn that down to be accurate. But if you turn it up, it might be faster when you load it. You can also make them stackable or not. So they'll work kind of like a deck of cards, but without all the features. So I usually make things stackable because it's useful. We're going to hit import. We are going to hit import apparently. Let's try that again. Alright, so it just drops my token into place. Using the mouse wheel, you can spin it around. I believe Q and E also let you spin cards around if you're more keyboard centric. You can flip the tile, just like you can a card. And you can resize it so it will fit on your board. And now that you've made one, you can Control C or right-click copy and Control V to create more wherever you want them in the world. So that's how I made all the tokens in this game. Every token you see is that. Dice work the same way. You go to your components, choose a die, whether you want metal or plastic. I like plastic. Metal has a different physicality into, just like a real metal die. It's got weight to it in Tabletop Simulator. So if you like the metal dice, go with the metal dice. We'll drop a couple dice into place. Once again, you can color tint them. So I can make a pink die, and we're going to drop that onto the table. Dice have a roll feature instead of a shuffle. It's still R, which is handy. Rotation value, you can just jump a die to a specific value, and then you can change it between metal and plastic. And here you can kind of see it feels heavier in the game. And you can rotate it left or right. Dice rotate on their axes rather than like round like you did with a token. You can also make custom dice. So if we go back to our Steam folder and right-click Properties, Browse Local Files, back in that modding folder I showed you earlier, there's dice templates. And these are just pings that you can edit to make a new die faces in all your games. Once again, that works just like making a custom item. You hit Custom, Die, say it's a D20, and you browse for your file. I'm just going to choose a random image. It's going to fail, but it'll kind of show you what it does. And we import, and after a second or two, it will drop a brand new custom D20 that apparently looks like memory stick. But I didn't have a ping file prepared for dice. That's basically everything for how to get your Tabletop Simulator up and running. Everything I've done in this expansive thing is something I did in Walking Doggos. It's just a little bit more time consuming because there's more pieces. One thing you might notice is that there are meeples in the game. There are no custom meeples because meeples aren't necessarily completely free to use. Everyone in the board game industry uses meeples, but Tabletop Simulator didn't put meeples actually in the game. So if we go to the workshop, so we'll open up our Steam and go to the Community Hub for Tabletop Simulator and go to the workshop. You can find all sorts of components to games. So if you want meeples in your game, do a search for meeples. There's going to be standard meeples, meeples for adventure, cartoon meeples apparently. I really like the Meeple Royale component, which I actually have loaded over here. We're going to go to your workshop and load Meeple-O-Rama. Once again, it'll take a minute to load, especially the first time. But this has all sorts of really useful meeples for different games. And I can just copy the meeple I want. I can load up the file that I was working on. and paste that meeple into place. And then you can resize it, you can color it. The meeples in Meeple-O-Rama have a lay down feature as well, which I really like. That's necessary in my game. And there's various things, like each player has these cards. You can lock those cards into place, which I've done for most of the players, but not all of them. I'll have to fix that. So we've set up our table. The last thing you need to do is actually get it on the workshop itself. That's where this modding icon comes into play. So if you go to modding and workshop upload, you're going to give it a title, and we're going to call this for BGB. This is just a test. We need to give it a thumbnail URL, which I have the correct size one somewhere. Logo. Upload that just like you do everything else. Now we're going to select the game types. So this is a board game, it's a strategy game, and it's an original game. Setup supports 2, 3, 4, and 4 more players. And we're going to hit upload. Now don't worry, when you upload, it's going to upload it to the site, but it won't be visible and live yet. So you have a little bit of time to make sure it's perfect. Here it says your upload was successful. It's going to give you this little number, which we'll copy, and hit OK. So now we're going to go back to Steam, and we're going to search for that number. And you can see it's not there. So that's good. But if you go to your own profile, so we're going to go to View My Profile, and if you go to Workshop Items over here, I have mine showcased, but you'll just click on Workshop Items. You can see now that we have this testing for BGB, and we're going to click on that. So this is just the Steam store page for it. You can see you're already subscribed to it. Everything looks normal. What you want to do is hit Edit Title and Description. This will let you actually type in and paste in more easily the full description of what your game is. You can add links, so you can link to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, whatever you need to do to link your stuff. I usually put a link to the game itself, my main websites, right in the top of the description for people to find. And you can say it requires DLC or required items that might be in your store. It's really that easy. The last thing you need to do is when you're ready to go, you make it public, and it shows up searchable on the main storefront. But I don't want to make this test one visible, so we're just going to delete that. Now let's say, as we've discovered in my build, there's a couple of bugs in that this white card is movable and it should not be. So we're going to load a fresh install of my game. We're going to lock that card into place. And we're going to make sure all the other cards, you can see if they can lock in place because there'll be that little white halo around anything that can be moved. Everything I want locked into place is now. So we're going to upload. We're going to go to modding again. We're going to workshop upload. We're going to update the workshop. And here you find the actual ID of your game, which I actually don't know. Stats. I actually don't know where that number is here. It's usually in the URL bar, but you don't see that when you're in Steam itself. So what I usually do is I just have it bookmarked, and I grab the ID out of the URL bar, and we paste that workshop ID in. And we can update the thumbnail URL if we want. We can change the types and how many players. So we're just going to hit update. And after a few seconds, it will upload to the workshop, And now everybody gets your new version the next time they log into Tabletop Simulator. So that's basically all I had prepared to show. There's a lot more to Tabletop Simulator than just that, but that's the basics to get you up and running. Like I showed you, there's scripting, which I unfortunately don't know a whole lot about. I haven't made any games that really require scripting. So that's what I'll be learning next, probably. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask in the live chat. I'm opening the floor. I'm a little behind in chat, so I don't see any more. Oh, how do you invite people to play your private playtest? That is a wonderful question. So if you don't want to put it on the public workshop, say I don't want to make this available for everybody to go play, do everything just like I showed you, but instead of when you upload it to the workshop, do not make it visible. Just keep the visibility to either hidden or friends only. If you keep it hidden, then you're the only person that has access to it. And as long as you have access to it, it will show up in your workshop menu here. So even though I deleted the testing for BGB, that's still here that I can load. So there's my test file with my big meeple in the middle. So now that you have a game running with your load, we're going to go to Menu, and we're going to go back to the main menu. So now we want to actually play test. We're going to create a table. I'm going to create a multiplayer game. We're going to name it Testing for BGB, or whatever you want. We're going to give it a password because I don't want random people to get in. And the max players of my game is 6, and we're going to create a server. We're going to go ahead and load white hat capture the flag. And it loads my game. Now anybody else can go into their Tabletop Simulator and they'll hit join and everything is listed here. If you want to find something specific, you say testing for BGB. My game would show up. You'd click on it, you'd open it, and there'd be there. Hopefully that answers your question. The next question is, what do you do to invite others to playtest for you if you've made it public? Anyone in particular to advertise? How do you collect the feedback if you aren't there? Honestly, I do this. It's hard. Just finding people to playtest is that's a struggle I have in the real world with development. I'm really active on Discords. There's a board game Discord for the there's a Discord for the board game subreddit of Reddit. It's just our board games. I'm a mod on that Discord. I talk to friends there. There's people there that'll sometimes play games. Not often, but sometimes. There are all sorts of Discords that have playtests for Tabletop Simulator. You can advertise your Tabletop Simulator mods for... there's various Facebook groups for looking for playtesters. I know there's a playtesting Facebook group. And if you're not there, the best thing to do is to have a message. Like if you go to your thing, I always have my Twitter name and my email address so people can access. If people want to contact me, they have a way of contacting me. Obviously make sure you have the correct spam filtering and stuff in place because it's the internet. But it kind of depends, honestly. Hopefully that answers a little bit of your question at least. Let's see. While I wait to see if there's any other questions, some other tools that are available here. There's vector points where you can draw on the board itself. So I can just draw on the board, and everybody at the table can see my wonderful drawings. That's really useful in some games. You can create zones. So hidden zones are kind of neat. If you draw a hidden zone on the table, then right click it and choose a color. Only the blue player can see what's inside that zone. So I can't see all the stuff I just hid. But if I make it white, I can see everything. Now, you should be able to note that anybody can go in pretty much and modify stuff while you're playing, which can be frustrating. That's what the permissions is for. So you can turn off a lot of features if you don't want people messing with your setup. Hopefully you don't have that problem. Most of the time people are pretty cool. It's basically just like playing at a table. You have to do what you expect. Lines let you actually measure the size of the table or various things. You put text on the table. This lets you combine, attach, fix joint. I don't know a whole lot about that. That's really new. Decals. Oh, got another question. If you want to do a solo playtest and play as all the players, do you just change what color you are each turn? That's a really good way of doing it. Or you just don't worry so much about the turns and which player you are. If you're getting fancy with the colors, then you do have to go in and make sure that, okay, as the blue player, I can't see what the white player is doing over here. So you do have to test some of that stuff. But a lot of times when I'm just solo playtesting, I'll literally just, I'm going to go ahead and reset. I'll just go in and I'll just start playing. So in this game, it's a worker placement. So let's say I want to put 2 workers there, and a worker on build application, and a worker on enable disable. And I just play a game out, and then I'm like, okay, so I wrote 4 blocks of code. I'm a little trigger happy today. So there's my 4 blocks of code. I build an application that costs 4 blocks of code, so I'll flip an application over, add it to my hand, and I'll just play out the game without worrying too much about the protocol of everybody else. The same way you'd do at an actual table. And you can even modify other people's hands. So I can put something in the red player's hand and just flip it over so I can see it. That's a card that I don't have the back hidden for. Heather says, our weekly game group likes to have a lot of fun drawing with the drawing tool. We played Betrayal at Baldur's Gate last night, and that was the table at the end of the night. Yeah, the drawing tools are a lot of fun. A lot of the tools in this game are just fun to play with. Like there's a flick option, and I can literally just flick a die. And since those are, apparently I chose metal dice for those. I think I broke the flick tool. Oh, there we go. So the dice are a little heavier. Can flick the meeples around. There's actually achievements for doing a bunch of silly things. There's an achievement for spawning 10,000 poker chips on the table, which really makes the game slow down. And when you're done playing the game, you can always just flip the table. I mean, that's how most games end, right? So, and of course, if you've screwed something up, you can always hit rewind time, and it'll reload from like 10 seconds or 20 seconds earlier, depending. I forget how that works exactly. Zoom in on the pencil, drawn on the table, ended up crazy detailed. Possibly something you do when you are eliminated. Yep. So you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. Heather just showed a. I'll pull that open. So they actually drew on the table there, which is great. If you have a deck of all unique fonts, do you have to upload each individual file one at a time, or is there a way to batch upload? So the easiest way, you don't have to really worry about fonts. Like my deck is using coding font I found, and really they're all PNG files, so you don't have to worry about the actual font data. There are tools like if you use Nandeck, component.studio. There's a couple other tools. Oh, fronts. God, I can read. I swear I can read. If you have a deck of all unique fronts, do you have to upload each individual one at a time? No. So that's what the deck templates are for. You make another deck template. So let's say I want to make a deck like I gotta go to components. So we're gonna go to objects, components, and we're gonna make a custom deck with unique fronts and unique backs. So we're gonna choose a deck, and we're gonna choose pugs for the face. We're gonna choose unique backs as a checkbox, and we're gonna choose corgis for the backs. And there are 4 wide, 2 high, and there are a total of 8 cards. And we're going to import. So now we have a deck of cards that have pugs on one side and corgis on the other. And each front is unique. And each back is also unique. So it all depends on that layout template file I showed you very early in the video. You can also, if you really want, unload each card by itself. It's time consuming, and I don't recommend that. Other things you can add. So tiles are boxes, hexes, circles, or rounded. You add a top or bottom, choose a thickness, and whether they're stackable or not. And those work just like everything else. I mean, basically everything is you have an image file, and it works. So we're coming up about an hour. If there's any more questions, got about 5 more minutes. Otherwise, I will end the stream. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. This will be on YouTube at the link under the Board Games Broadcast. And you can find me, Mattie Schraeder, at my Twitter link, or you can find my Steam games for examples from my Steam community file. So, thank you so much. And thank you for watching.